Welcome back. We start a news bulletin from Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is arriving in Islamabad today on a two-day official visit. Pakistan's Foreign Ministry says Erdogan will hold one-on-one meetings with Prime Minister Imran Khan and other top leadership of the country. The ministry said the two leaders will co-chair the 6th session of the Pakistan-Turkey High-Level Strategic Cooperation Council. The session will be followed by a joint declaration, while a number of important agreements are expected to be signed. The ministry said President Erdogan will also address a joint session of Pakistan's parliament tomorrow. Khan and Erdogan will address the Pakistan-Turkey Business and Investment Forum hosted by leading investors from both countries. For more on this, we are joined by our Islamabad correspondent Isa Naqvi. Thank you for joining us. Isa, what are the engagement of the Turkish president during this two-day visit in Pakistan?
Ramsha, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is expected to arrive in Islamabad shortly, after which he will come to the Prime Minister house, where he'll be given a guard of honor. There will be an informal meeting with Prime Minister Imran Khan, after which a dinner is being hosted in the honor of the Turkish delegation by President Arif Alvi. There will be a formal meeting as well. The Turkish president is accompanied by a high-level delegation, which includes not just the cabinet ministers, but also leading Turkish companies' CEOs. This will conclude today's engagements. Tomorrow is the main day of the visit, where President Erdogan will address the joint parliamentary session, after which the main highlight of the visit is the high-level Strategic Cooperation Council meeting, which will be held in the format of cabinets. The two cabinets will sit together. Pakistani side will be chaired by Prime Minister Imran Khan, and the Turkish side will be led by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, after which the joint declaration will be signed. Several MOUs and agreements are also expected to be signed, and the two leaders, Imran Khan and Tayyip Erdogan, will address a joint stakeout as well. And this will conclude the engagements of the Turkish delegation in Islamabad.
As you said, guard of honor is prepared to welcome the president. How has Islamabad prepared for this visit? Do we know the key agenda items?
Yes, exactly. It's not just the bilateral issues, but the regional issues, the international global scenarios are also going to be discussed. The main highlight of the event is the HLSCC meeting, in which the bilateral trade and investment, sports, culture, tourism, education sectors, a memorandum of understandings and agreements will be discussed in that. But apart from that, the issues of the Indian-occupied Kashmir, the atrocities being meted out by the Indian forces, that will be discussed. The issues of Islamophobia and the modern world that is facing today, those issues will be discussed. The regional realignment and how Pakistan and Turkey can play a role. All these things will be discussed during the meetings.
Thank you, Isa Naqvi, respondent, for joining us and giving us details about President Erdogan's visit to Pakistan. Meanwhile, Pakistan has expressed serious concerns over U.S. sale of sophisticated air defense weapons system to India. New Delhi is set to buy a $2.6 billion worth of Seahawk military helicopters from U.S. defense firm Lockheed Martin. In a press brief, the Foreign Office said the deal between Delhi and Washington will further destabilize the volatile region. The spokesperson Aisha Faruqi said the international community is fully aware of India's aggressive policy against Pakistan. She said the region of South Asia cannot afford an arms race and conflict. The U.S. has praised Pakistan's jailing of banned outfit head Hafiz Saeed in 2 terror financing cases. Yesterday, an anti-terrorism court sentenced Saeed for 5.5 years and a fine of 15,000 rupees in each case. The U.S. Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs said the conviction of Hafiz Saeed and his associate is an important step forward. It said the conviction is vital for Pakistan in meeting its international commitments to combat terrorist financing. Hafiz Saeed and his associate Malik Zafar Iqbal have been convicted under Pakistan's Anti-Terrorism Act 1997. Moving on, 4 U.S. senators have asked the State Department to provide assessments on India's crackdown in occupied Kashmir. In a letter to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the lawmakers have asked Washington to pursue India to end its lockdown of the occupied valley. They expressed concerns over the communications blackout and human rights violations in the occupied Kashmir. They said India has imposed history's longest ever internet shutdown by a democracy, paralyzing businesses, healthcare, and education. The lawmakers also raised the issue of hundreds of Kashmiris, including key politicians, under arrest for 3 months. The occupied valley has been reeling under India's lockdown and communications blackout for the past 193 days. U.S. Cambridge City has become the second city to pass a resolution against India's controversial citizenship law. Last week, Seattle City Council passed a resolution condemning the new law. The Cambridge City Council has asked Indian Parliament to repeal the law and stop a proposed National Register of Citizens. The resolution said the new act uses religion as a criterion for Indian citizenship. Meanwhile, Indian Union Territory Puducherry has also passed a resolution registering strong protest against the law. The resolution stated the Citizenship Amendment Act has caused pain and chaos among the people across the country. Turkey says it has killed 55 Syrian soldiers in northwestern Idlib province. The defense ministry said Ankara's local sources have confirmed the casualties. The attack comes after Ankara threatened to strike Syrian forces anywhere in retaliation for an assault which killed 5 Turkish soldiers earlier this week. Tensions are high in the region following clashes between Turkish and Russian-backed Syrian forces in Idlib. Yesterday, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan accused Moscow of committing a massacre in Syria. Russia rejects the allegation, saying Ankara is breaking its ceasefire agreements with Moscow. The Kremlin says Turkish troops are aggravating the situation in Idlib. The U.S. Senate has advanced legislation to limit President Donald Trump's ability to wage war against Iran. The bipartisan resolution would give Congress the power to authorize the use of military force if necessary. More in this report.
With the tensions between Washington and Tehran not letting up, many believe war is still a possibility. To guard against an impulse or accident making the situation worse, the U.S. Senate has passed the War Powers Resolution. The measure is meant to restrain the president's ability to wage war without congressional approval. 8 Republicans joined Democrats to support the resolution 51-45 to proceed to a final vote. President Trump believes the bill will send a message of weakness to Tehran. The bill's lead sponsor, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine, however, argues that Congress is only standing up for the rule of law.
If we decide to go to war, we should do it based on careful deliberation. Some viewed this as is it an effort to tie President Trump's hands. It's not really about President Trump. It's really not even about the president. It's about Congress. It's about Congress fully inhabiting our Article 1 role to declare war and taking that deliberation seriously. Some thought, well, maybe this will send a bad message to adversaries around the world. We don't send a message of weakness when we stand up for the rule of law.
Republican Senator Mike Lee said Congress authorizing a military action against Iran shows strength, not weakness.
There is abundant support for the United States taking tough positions with regard to Iran. And that as part of that, we want to make sure that any military action that needs to be authorized is in fact authorized properly by Congress. That doesn't show weakness. That shows strength. And I think that's the strength that's going to unfold as we debate this.
Last month, the House of Representatives passed a similar resolution after the assassination of Iran's military commander Qasem Soleimani. Under the U.S. Constitution, Congress, and not the President, holds the power to declare war.
In an effort to bring back some normality, Iraq has reopened Baghdad's bridge, closed for months by anti-government protesters. The Syenite Bridge is one of the main routes leading to the fortified Green Zone, home to government and diplomatic buildings. Iraq's military says city officials were able to reopen the bridge with the cooperation of protesters. Security forces lifted concrete barricades stopping traffic from using the bridge. Later on, security forces clashed with protesters, firing tear gas and rubber bullets in an attempt to keep them away from the bridge. Nearly 500 people have been killed in anti-government demonstrations raging since last October. President Donald Trump has brushed aside the Philippines' decision to end the visiting forces agreement with the U.S. Manila axed the 20-year-old defense pact on Wednesday, saying U.S. actions undermine Filipino sovereignty and judicial system. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper called the move unfortunate, hoping it could be reversed or delayed. President Trump downplayed the snub, saying it would save the U.S. a lot of money.
Well, I never minded that very much, to be honest. We helped the Philippines very much. We helped them defeat ISIS. I get along. Actually, I have a very good relationship there, but I really don't mind. If they would like to do that, that's fine. We'll save a lot of money. You know, my views are different than other people. I view it as, thank you very much, we save a lot of money.
In China's Hubei province, 242 people have died from the new coronavirus in the deadliest day of the outbreak so far. China's National Health Commission says almost 1,500 people have been confirmed infected in the last 24 hours, marking a tenfold increase. 1,363 people have died from the disease, while over 60,000 have been infected. More in this report.
The death toll from the new coronavirus is still climbing, claiming lives in China every day. The new approach to diagnosis has seen the number of cases dramatically increase, while the World Health Organization says so far there is no end in sight.
We need to focus on the task, and the task is to contain the virus, to detect the cases, to treat the cases. If we keep doing those things, yes, we may see a drop in the number of cases, but I think it's way too early to try and predict the beginning, the middle, or the end of this epidemic.
Officials in Rio de Janeiro have stepped up their preparations for any possible coronavirus cases during Brazil's carnival season. Panic and hysteria continue to spread. Government officials are worried.
It's a concern because there is a great movement of people and large number of tourists coming into the country from all over the world. So when one thinks about it, coronavirus can be transmitted through drops in the transmission area, then yes, it is concerning.
In Japan, another 44 people have tested positive on the cruise ship quarantined in Yokohama. The total number of cases on board have now risen to 218.
The WHO says it is extending its global emergency for the Ebola outbreak in DR Congo for another 3 months. The UN Health Agency says signs of improvement are extremely positive. WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said one case of Ebola in an area as unstable as eastern DR Congo could create a larger epidemic. Earlier, the WHO said progress has been made to combat the disease in the country's conflict-battered North Kivu and Ituri provinces. The WHO's regional director for Africa said the country's situation is different now than a few months ago. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back to our news bulletin. In Libya, the Khalifa Haftar-led Libyan National Army says it will not allow the UN to use Mitiga Airport in the capital, Tripoli. The LNA spokesperson Ahmed Mizmari said the UN will have to use other airports because Turkey is using it as an airbase. Mizmari said the Eastern Army cannot guarantee the safety of UN flights to the capital. The UN says it is concerned that blocking the flights will interrupt its humanitarian aid operation in the country. The International Organization for Migration says there are over 650,000 illegal immigrants currently in Libya. It said the majority of refugees lack medical care and basic services. Germany's far-right AfD party says it will sue Chancellor Angela Merkel for alleged abuse of office. The party claims the Chancellor coerced a state premier into resigning after he was elected with the support of the far-right. The AfD wants to file 2 lawsuits against Merkel, arguing her actions forced Thuringia's newly elected President Thomas Kemmerich to step down last week. The party's co-chair George Meuthen said the Chancellor has committed a violation of the right of equal opportunities for all parties. Merkel called Kemmerich's election unforgivable and said the result must be reversed. The Premier of Thuringia called for the regional parliament to be dissolved after his election caused a scandal for accepting far-right votes. It has been 75 years since Allied forces bombed the German city of Dresden in World War II. Some military historians suggest the city had little, if any, strategic value. 75 years later, the trauma from the event still lingers. The report has more.
Nora Lang was 13 when 1,000 Allied bombers dropped 4,000 tons of explosives on her city. She says those were the most horrible hours of her life.
First, there were sounds of bombs, and then I thought, now tanks are rolling over our heads. The front line was not far. I thought, maybe this is the end of the war, and at the same time, I thought it's the end of the world. As a child, I thought that.
Lang says she still feels the pain and anguish of the bombing to this day, but she's also haunted by the fact that scores of children in the Middle East and across the world are suffering the same fate as her.
Is there no one to help us? That was our question. And we thought this cannot be happening. In my view, these are the questions to this very day those ask who have to go through something like this. Is there no one to help us? You are aware that it's not happening around the globe, so there must be many places where peace reigns. People must react after all.
British and American bombers killed 25,000 people when they raided Dresden between the 13th and the 15th of February 1945. UNICEF has recorded 170,000 violations of children's rights in war zones over the past decade. That works out at 45 violations each day.
The UN Security Council will gather on February 18th to Russia's request to discuss implementing the Minsk agreements. Russian envoy Vladimir Polyansky says Moscow asked for a UNSC session to look at the agreements on their 5th anniversary. The Minsk agreements deal with disputes between Russia and Ukraine. The contact group on eastern Ukraine also met in the Belarusian capital Minsk to discuss a political settlement to the conflict. Ukraine's representative said the sides agreed on the first of 3 new disengagement areas along the line of contact. She said the withdrawal of armed groups and military equipment over the border remains the basic precondition to start a political process. The European Parliament has approved a tough opening position for talks with UK on its future relationship with the EU. Members of European Parliament passed a resolution asking Britain to follow EU policies. The resolution calls for measures to ensure Brexit does not cause gender discrimination and to avoid a crackdown on tax havens with links to the UK. It also demands a dynamic alignment of the country with EU laws. The resolution says the UK should commit to fair economic competition to prevent European businesses being undercut by British rivals. In the US, Iowa's Democratic Party chairman Troy Price has resigned in the aftermath of the chaotic caucus that kicked off the presidential nomination race. Price said the technical problems that led to questioning the accuracy of the process were unacceptable. In his resignation letter, Price urged the vendors involved to shoulder the blame alongside the party's Iowa branch. A new app to report results more quickly was distributed, but a coding error delayed the final results by 3 days. Former Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg ultimately won the Iowa caucus in a narrow victory over Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Both the Sanders and Buttigieg campaigns have asked for a partial recanvass of the result. Iowa Democratic leaders will meet on Saturday to elect an interim president. 13 people are killed after a private bus collided with a truck in India's northern state of Uttar Pradesh. Witnesses say a bus carrying over 40 passengers hit a stationary truck from behind. Police say 31 others are injured in the accident near the Firozabad city on the Agra-Lucknow expressway. They said the bus was going from Indian capital Delhi to the eastern state of Bihar. In South Africa, extreme drought is killing livestock animals across the northern Kalahari. The arid climate is hitting farming and the tourism industry. Forced to interrupt their work, farmers and hoteliers alike desperately wait for the rain. This report will tell you more.
More than 1,000 animals have died on this Northern Cape game farm over the last few months, as South Africa's entire Kalahari region is being crippled by one of the worst droughts locals have ever seen.
We are trying to go on as we are at the moment, but it's only going to be so long before all our resources are out and we don't have any money left to do what we do.
Turu Lodge, like so many others in the area, is heavily reliant on international hunters to keep the business afloat. But recently, none have arrived.
Unfortunately, the drought forced us to place all our bookings on hold. We can't book a guy coming from overseas, having the safari feeling and trying to give him the best safari he ever had, but the animals that's here are very skinny and he's dying.
A few kilometers away, lifelong commercial farmer Johan Steenkamp admits he can't keep going on like this past March.
Our animals are really suffering. We have lost many animals. At this stage, I have between 30 and 40% of my herd left. Everything else either died or we had them slaughtered.
Even as the region enters its much anticipated rainy season, the farms and their animals will need more than a year to recover, and many simply don't have that long.
In Palestine, a continued ban on trade by the Israeli government is making life harder for ordinary people. The Agriculture Ministry says Israel has tightened its blockade on the agricultural exports, a staple source of income for many. More in this report.
Against a background of rockets, mortars, and late-night Israeli airstrikes, a Gaza chocolate factory keeps going. The owner of the Al Aris factory wants to export his products to lucrative markets outside, but cannot. All the trade that happens here is controlled by Israel. The Israeli government has been strangling the economy of the Strip with a trade blockade.
Without lifting and ending the Israeli siege imposed on the Gaza Strip and finding a radical solution to the Gaza Strip issue, there will be no economic activity or economic growth.
Everything from processed food to vegetables to clothing, Israel controls the goods that enter and leave Gaza. Since Palestine rejected Donald Trump's peace plan, Israel has only tightened its bans, placing extra taxes and fees on goods.
In Gaza, the prices of rent, electricity and fuel are high. The raw materials come through Egypt and the Israeli ports. The transportation fees are very high, so all this reflects on the price of the products.
Many believe if the ban is not lifted, poverty will get worse, encouraging extremism and radicalization.
Stock markets across Europe are trading lower as China's new coronavirus epidemic cases surge. Investors' fears mount as sectors with heavy exposure to China have slumped. London's FTSE 100 is trading 1% lower after heavyweight bank Barclays drops over 3%, while utility Centrica skids 13%. CAC 40 in Paris and Frankfurt's DAX have lost nearly 0.5% each. In Asia, Shanghai Composite led the losses, closing over 0.5% lower as investors failed to sustain the rally. Seoul's Kospi traded fractionally lower, powering early gains despite SK Hynix shares surged over 2%. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.